around like I'm like Turner, I'm hustle Batman. 2 words for any nigga, fuck with my money, dead man.
Welcome to Thugcrowd Radio. Please listen to this important disclaimer in its entirety. All participants of this Thugcrowd Radio episode are characters. None of the stories told during these episodes are based on facts, truth, or reality. All works of fiction displayed during this episode that resemble real-life situations are coincidental and are not meant to serve as guides or tutorials to commit any crimes in any country. Please consult an attorney for local laws and regulations. And as always, trust your inner criminal.
Hey everybody, welcome to Thugcrowd episode 22. Episode 22. How y'all doing?
Yeah, we're all recovering, I think. Most people.
Yeah, I think we're both recovering.
Hangover Part 3.
I'm just tired. I feel like I'm finally getting the moisture that my body has been so desperately craving for the past 5 or 6 days now.
You need some electrolytes, man.
Yeah.
Pasteurize plants grape, dude.
Yeah,
Coconut water.
I've been smashing them fucking Gatorades and orange juices and shit.
Yeah. Love juice. I've been just drinking water, trying to chill. I took a long, nice nap right before the stream.
You need to get a lot of salt as well. It's really counterintuitive, but you need a lot of water.
I'll just let you know I'm salty as fuck. So
Always.
Yeah, jump into IRC and get my daily dose. But yeah, so how's everybody doing since DEF CON? That was the last time we all talked.
Rough, man. I still didn't go to work today. Did you guys ever find hookers on the strip to talk to?
We didn't particularly find them, but we found their calling cards, and we were trying to uncover the mysteries of them in a late night impromptu meetup on Saturday, where we walked around and we were in search of the elusive, but not actually elusive, business cards for company.
We just happened to be out too late.
no,
Yeah.
I think we had oh yeah, that's right. They have babies to go home to. That was one of the excuses we got.
Yeah, I mean,
Really
I was more interested in just understanding the sort of dynamic of how the because we're tipped off. Actually, Hermit noticed this with the numbers and the websites for all of the advertisements. That all of them are different, and some of them are landlines. We were using the bots in this Discord to do caller ID and see who the carrier was, and some of the numbers for these services were landlines. Some of them are Twilio, and the website. There's a different website on each person, and so it was massive infrastructure.
Coming from a country where prostitution has been legalized and is fine, absolutely fine, for a long time, it's really strange going somewhere like Vegas where people have to have all these middlemen and clandestine kind of tricks. It's really
I really
bizarre,
like
actually.
the Asian lady who leant over to you and whispered in his ear, like, was it something about massage parlors?
Yeah, they kind of were tipping off at the real other seedy underbelly. I mean, I've only ever really been to Vegas like once before, and I don't really understand. I'm an innocent small town boy, and I'm not.
Well, if you guys, I mean, you can fire automatic weapons, but you can't have sex with somebody. That's really strange. I mean, there's too many middlemen in your system. I think this is an industry that's ripe for disruption. To put on my blockchain crypto hat.
Yep.
All right.
You don't need all those black guys on the street handing out cards and like taking a cut and stuff. You don't need any of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was just interesting to see the infrastructure that was in place for that, with all the numbers and everything. I asked if they had any hacker-themed people, and they hung up on me, so I was very disappointed. But
I got directly approached at least once.
So what about that? Oh, actually, one thing I noticed this year that is I notice every other DEF CON is that sorry, I didn't notice this year that I noticed every other DEF CON. There's always dudes walking through the crowd real quick, and they'll be like, "Kush, kush, coke, kush," and like you know, if you want to buy it, like by the time you turn around, they're gone. And this year, like nobody was like obviously no one's selling dope, like no one's selling weed because you can buy it at the shop. But yeah, I didn't. There wasn't that many people trying to like sell me drugs this year.
Yeah, that's good. I think.
I almost got some blow. Not sure about you guys, but someone actually tried to hook me up, and it was kind of obvious that it was kind of a little bit of a controlled environment where the dealers were.
Yeah, you have to be very careful in Vegas. Very, very careful.
Nah, I shouldn't worry too much about the strip. There's too many eyeballs on that, and it'd be kind of actually counterintuitive to actually do stupid crimes like that and get caught because that would actually ruin their ventures and crime later. Yeah. But anything off the strip, oh yeah, that's fair game.
Yeah,
I got approached right on the floor of the casino. Just just some nice guy wondering if I needed some cocaine.
Yeah, very, very convenient when that happens. It makes me very suspicious because I'm a very paranoid kind of person.
yeah.
I immediately think it's like an intel agency trying to trap me in some way.
Well, if they're gonna give me coke and they're gonna give it to me for free, no, I'm just playing. I don't do drugs.
So, what do you guys think about? I was actually very interested in all the rooted or bricked slot machines that were everywhere. I'm not sure how normal that is for Vegas, but there was quite a lot, and it was interesting to see.
I saw some tweets, specifically the ones in the. There was a series of 4 that we stopped past at the Flamingo, and they were, remember right at the end there was like 4 of them. And some guy or some Twitter account had like attributed that to their hacking, I guess, but it really just seems like they didn't boot properly or something. I'm not sure. I took a photo of maybe 4 or 5 blue screens this year only, which is less than usual.
Well, is there anything else anybody wants to share about their experience?
I just partied the whole time.
Yeah.
Literally didn't go to like any talks. I showed up for like the first day and it was weak. And then there weren't really any talks I wanted to go to. So I just stayed out and partied all night till like 6 a.m.
It was, I mean, if anyone hasn't seen the Thugcrowd Twitter account and you want to know how to Thugcrowd Twitter, you'll find a photo of some people with a wheelchair having to wheel a thug around.
Yeah, no, that was interesting times too. Yeah, that was a cool stream that we did. I'm glad that we got to do it, even though it was very haphazard, and I went from having a laptop with our OBS and nice VPN travel router to like a cell phone, and it somehow worked.
Yeah, so like we didn't really cover it on the time, I think, but what happened was the hotel internet just like went down, and we were cabled to the hotel, so it wasn't like we were getting de-auth or anything. The router was just like shitting itself, not getting an IP. It was like the hotel internet, somebody was fucking with it, and I mean, welcome to DEF CON, I guess.
Yeah, it was awesome. But yeah, no, I'm excited for future times to go, and definitely know a lot more about what to do now. Met a lot of cool people though. I'm glad to see those people who are listening to our podcast that came out of nowhere and were like, "Hey, we like your show." And we're like, "What?"
Yeah, shout out to Dead Rabbit, head coach.
Oh yeah, all those people that hung out with us too on Saturday. So yeah, no, that was awesome. Yeah, anybody else do anything cool this weekend who didn't go to DEF CON? What'd you do, Jen?
That's classified.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, he stayed at home playing with himself.
Yep.
But yeah, okay. So yeah, tonight we're going to be talking to Crypt0s, who is in here right now, who's done a bunch of really cool projects with radio and just other general pen testing things. So he's going to tell us about some of his projects, his approach, and things that he's been working on. So that's awesome. So yeah, let's get into some of the news stories here, and I'll share this in the chats real quick. So our show notes. All right, cool. So yeah, the first one we have here, interesting, about the pacemaker hacks, which I had seen today. That I didn't really know that there was more there's additional pacemaker hacks besides like electromechanical hacks and magnets and EMP stuff. But there's people who are doing a chain of vulns and some Medtronic stuff that in the infrastructure that Medtronic uses that they could control pacemakers remotely.
How remotely?
I think entirely remotely, because it's like I guess they're whatever hub they're talking to is that talks to these what's it called, pacemakers. People have figured out ways to break into
Is it
that.
Bluetooth or Bluetooth BLE? To talk to the pacemaker.
No, this is through like the actual infrastructure of the Medtronic, of the company who made the pacemaker.
Yeah,
So
but how do
have-
they talk to the pacemaker inside the person's body?
Oh, I didn't read that far.
Yeah. Seems
I
like
don't.
go down that rabbit hole, Barnaby, and see what happens. Bluetooth low energy is probably the way that it communicates, and the security on that is not great by default.
I mean, I'm
Otherwise,
with an Uber
Fitbits wouldn't work.
Yeah. You can grab an Uber tooth and a Bluetooth dongle, and you basically like plug that shit in, and you set up a FIFO buffer, and then you open, and then you just dump everything with the utilities that come with like the Uber tooth into that FIFO, open it with Wireshark, and you're basically, it's like same as looking at like Wi-Fi traffic or any network traffic. And then you're just recording PCAPs of Bluetooth, so that's 10 out of 10 lols. There's some tools in Kali for cracking the mild crypto that comes with it too. I'm gonna assume that if it is BLE, it's like all the same shit.
Yeah,
it just works. It just works in quotes.
Yeah. No, I see. There's so much to review in the past couple of days as far as new vulnerabilities that were released at Black Hat and DEF CON, specifically the Black Hat stuff that I didn't even know about. Because this was one of them that I just threw on here in case anybody wanted to chat about it.
It mentions in here as well the insulin pump stuff. That was something that ZLZ has on his radar. So I guess he's not around, not back yet.
Cool. So yeah, the next thing we have on here, which I was really interested in, was this Discord URI exploitation. So we were actually talking to Discord a little bit.
You let me stop you real quick.
Yeah.
Someone needs to give our guest the author stream rights so he can hop in here real quick.
Oh, Rev.
He's up in general. No, Shay.
Oh, Shay. Here, I'll move them in.
Yep.
There you go, Ross.
That's the fact that they're not scanning uploads and you can just upload virus.exe on Discord and send it is a bit of a scary thing.
Yeah, that's actually the first thing that we had found. And then when I saw this as a chained part of it, or as another part of it, completely separate from what we had looked at before, that's when I was like, whoa, we need to talk to these people because, yeah, the other day we had found somebody who had uploaded some really old reverse shell or something to Discord via an image. It was like what's it called? Like a Visual Basic script. And then I was like, how did this get through the parsers? And then I realized that everything gets through the parsers. I ended up putting WannaCry and Zeus and other stuff in Discord, and they just was able to
It's
do
a
it.
bit because whenever you're testing a web application, it's part of the standard methodology. If you find somewhere where you can upload files, one of the first things you do is you upload the ICAR virus test to see if antivirus picks it up. That's like hacking 101, and they haven't even got that right. That scares me about everything else.
I mean, yeah, you could definitely we're talking about just throwing shitloads of shitloads of just malware samples into Discord and making it just a huge fucking mirror, and then just having it, blacklisted, having all the domains just blacklisted on every CDN, like having their CDN blacklisted by other CDNs.
Yeah, no, that was the interesting part to me is that if you can then host like even like a whatever sort of exploit you want just as on the Discord app CDN, like you can right now, like you can host C99.php or whatever sort of crypto locker bullshit you want to have.
It's actually better than raw.github because it serves it with the correct headers.
Yeah.
Wow. Gross.
Yep.
So Shay,
Thanks,
can you hear us?
Mm-hmm.
So you're the person who had wrote this?
Yep.
Okay. Oh yes, Shay. Hi. So, Shay, I guess do you want to tell us a little bit about what this, how you found this whole thing and what it means for everybody?
Yeah. So basically, I started off with I was on the bug testers Discord, like the official Discord testers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I was on there, and then someone had reported a bug about how you could actually up or post any URI you wanted, and it would actually open the MS dash settings, like that URI. Yeah, so basically, I saw that, and I was pretty interested, and I tried testing with other different URIs, and I tried calculator, and that worked, and then I started looking for different like URI exploits. And I looked up online and I found a few posts. And there was one post about how you could actually use the file URI to fetch a external resource. So I tried that out. It didn't work at first, but then
I'm gonna put my thing on here.
But then I ran it to Fiddler, and then I saw that it actually did a few requests such as the prop find and options. And with that, I figured out that it needed WebDAV enabled on the server. So I did that, and then I right-clicked it, pressed open URL, and my Discord froze. So I thought I wasn't anywhere, right? I just thought it was like a crasher or something. So then I waited, and then all of a sudden the file opened, and from then on I started other files.
Yeah,
that's really horrifying. So have you tried the standard ones, like you've tried File? Have you tried like Tel and Skype and other application handlers?
Have you tried it for mobile with like Android's like intent URI?
I haven't tried Android. I've only tried iOS, and with iOS, none of them actually really work except for the Mail2, which can be used to just bypass.
For Android, we should be able to see in the manifest file like the intents that it's registering when you install it.
You could launch other intents from it too. Actually, Shay, I posted in the Voiceless Voice channel something I did about Snap and using URIs and snap codes. Take a look at that. That's the other thing is the mobile stuff. I was thinking about that too. This is like pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tried this earlier today with VBS script, and that works.
I guarantee we're shitting on somebody's 0 day just talking about this right now, but all good fun.
I'd definitely say like Electron apps though, like we've been wary of Electron apps, and like we use Discord, but if you don't want to run Discord, there's a libpurple client for Bittleby, so you can use an IRC client, but then you have to use you get all the exploits in libpurple then. So
yeah, that's a pretty good library, libpurple.
Yeah,
go for it, gang. Use libpurple.
Safe.
Shay, what have you done as far as disclosure? Have you talked to Discord?
Yes, and that's the big part where I find Discord as a scummy company because of the way they dealt with it. Their security teams like utter shit.
Aren't they ignorant? Aren't they ignorant?
They're very arrogant. They're very arrogant.
And 100%.
Hubris will be your downfall in this industry, I'm afraid. No matter how cool your application is, it only takes one bad boy to get pissed off, and it's all over.
Hey, so they don't have any bounty. There's no they didn't give you any.
They do, but their guidelines are so vague that they can deny you at any point.
Yeah.
So
Pad tried reporting or something to them, and they were fucking dicks. And then until he delivered, but they were dicks.
This is where you give up on being a good guy and just go, well, fuck it, full disclosure. We'll let the pigs throw it to the pigs. See what the pigs do.
Wow. So
then they learn the hard way, unfortunately, and then they have to come crawling back later on and say, okay.
There was a whole message thread. It's really embarrassing to them of Pad's communication with them.
yeah, this is pretty wild. So yeah, do you have any other further testing that you're trying to do with other people that you're working with on this?
Right now I'm doing different tests, but I won't disclose them now. But
Okay.
I found some pretty interesting stuff, and we're writing a paper on it right now with team or Project Insecurity at
Wow.
Insecurity on Twitter.
Yep, that's cool. Yeah, so this is awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing this and coming to talk with us. Because we saw this earlier today and we're like, oh damn, because we also had seen from earlier, like earlier this week or last week, about just arbitrary file upload as well. So it's changed.
Shout out to Tavis if he's listening. Dude, this is right up your alley. Destroy it, man. Tavis, get Discord, destroy it.
Oh yeah. Oh, cool. So DNZ, if you are around and your computer actually loads this whole page, you want to talk a little bit about the Australian Assistance and Access Bill?
Yeah. My push to talk is my spacebar, so my browser just fucking went nuts. Yeah, basically this is the new bill that they're putting through all these amendments to existing bills where existing acts where there was a quote by the Prime Minister of Australia sometime last year, I think it was. I don't know, Faith might remember, where he said, Malcolm Turnbull, quote, the laws of mathematics are not as important as the laws of Australia. Now, I don't know if he knows that, how that exactly works, but there's all these amendments that have been made that are basically like, in Australia, like you as an individual or a target, the different agencies, so everywhere down to like state police, right through to internal crime commissions, like the department to do checks and balances on the other departments. They're basically setting up a system where they can do targeted attacks against individuals lawfully to defeat end-to-end encryption, basically. Now, with this, there's a lot of caveats that they've put in here, but in reading it, the text is all very, very vague. So basically, the gist is, in layman's terms, they say that they won't be using any backdoors, right? And they're talking at a network level. Like, so within the telco system, they're saying, look, we're not gonna man in the middle anyone. We're not gonna do any of this stuff, but if you sort of read between the lines of what they're talking about, it looks a lot like, that they can target devices, they can remove devices from your house without you knowing, they can replace them, they can plant shit in your house. I mean, that's not really anything new, I guess, like planting bugs in people's houses or people's workplaces, shit like that. But it also includes like, using exploits on people's devices. Because they're basically saying that they won't install any systems into the infrastructure that would compromise all the users, only the specific targets. So the way I looked at that was like, I kind of think that maybe we might see some infrastructure level stuff where certain targets might be like, because right now, if you get, as far as I know with intercepts, it's basically like span port, right? So at some point your port is mirrored and the mirrored traffic goes off to the feds and they're like, oh shit, half of it's like encrypted, can't crack it, unlucky. And there's a lot of fear tactics. Like if you read the link that's in our show notes, it's basically talking about, let me just quickly get to it. A high-risk sex offender was placed on a register for raping a 16-year-old female. Now, just take that sentence. That has fucking nothing to do with encryption.
Yeah.
He then served 9 years and is monitored at 2 incubations, blah, 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 shit. Okay, that has nothing to do with encryption. It goes on further to say that he was then communicating with a number of females between 13 and 17 years of age.
It just makes people mad because it's children.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's like marketing.
Yeah, but see, at this point, I I believe the age of consent is 16, and like, but you have, as long as you're not like an old dude, there's like some cutoff limit. I mean, if you're going for 16-year-olds, it's a bit weird anyway. But so like the way they've written this is like they haven't chosen a good use case for like whether even explaining this bill at all.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so what they would have done is using their own example, this guy would have had his traffic mirrored to another port, and then they've looked at it and gone like, oh, we can see that he's speaking with 13 and 17-year-old girls, but only on the platforms they would only be able to tell that on the platforms that are unencrypted. So what are they doing with the encryption? Like what is this guy, this registered sex offender, what is he doing in his encrypted sessions? And that's where I guess their argument comes in of now we need to be able to just target this one individual. So I can imagine that in the infrastructure level, they would put in something where they could potentially do downgrade attacks or something of the like, where it's in the system, but it doesn't target the entire system based on the vagueness of their of the writing in the documents.
So this kind of reminds me like the sort of the targeting aspect of it reminds me of the San Bernardino stuff too, of like can we do this for like one person? Not specifically asking the company, but just thinking that for somehow that there would be some way to turn off encryption for one person and not everybody else.
I mean, there is specifically a way you can do it for one person by just recording those prime numbers for like the Diffie-Hellman key exchange on a single computer. So they could, if they really want to go after sex offenders specifically, they could say, okay, well, if you want a computer, then every time your computer makes an SSL or TLS connection, that those prime numbers get logged, so we can retroactively go back and decode the traffic. They could do that.
I mean, yeah, but they're talking about like installing. I mean, it's basically as what I read it, installing malicious software. So, and like installing. So where they say they won't be backdooring, as in they won't be backdooring the network, is appears to what they're saying. But when it comes to an individual's computer, they can install anything they want basically, and then remove it. And as long as it's not found, and if the user does find it, the user can lawfully remove it as well. Like that's the other crazy thing. It seems really like like getting on the endpoint is their goal, along with but like I said, reading between the lines, it looks like that. Well, yeah, still placing some things in the system without damaging the system, but it really like there's a lot of caveats in there as well, such as when a request is made to a telecoms provider for an intercept. There's this, I can't remember the exact wording, but it's like if it was if the telco provider, like they can't be sued. There can't be a civil case against the telco provider if they make a mistake. So as long as the telco provider was doing an intercept as asked by the police or by the intelligence agencies, so like ASIO, AFP, local police, whoever, if they intercept the wrong person, that person can't then like there's no recourse for that person to say like, hey, I was like illegally intercepted or whatever, because it was in like they had best intent, the ISP had best intentions in their efforts to get the right person. Like there's all these kind of weird things in there like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty scary. Like I don't like it at all.
How does it make it easier for like a bad actor to gain that access?
I mean, it doesn't really. Like, if you're a bad, I guess, like, one of the things I was discussing, I was discussing with someone who's studying criminology as well at the moment, doing their masters in it, that, like, with the different departments that are allowed to do this, it includes state police. And there's a definition of who...
It's easy to get access. Like, the more easier that you make it or available to different law enforcement agencies, the easier it is for a criminal to have that same access.
Right.
My friend loves that shit.
Yeah, exactly right. So, like, if you're inside an intelligence agency such as ASIS or ASIO, like you can put in a request to have it done through your specific person who's, whatever in the agency, but they're probably more clued in to how the whole system works. Whereas the state police, it's like a police chief, like, hey chief, just gonna go down and get some donuts, and can you just like intercept this fucking guy for me? And yeah, cool, whatever. I have no idea what that means. That sounds good. Like, it just, that would definitely, if you wanted to try and.
Well, Sprint has a law enforcement portal that's regularly abused because it's available to like state police, for instance.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. The other part of this as well included overseas intercepts, which is kind of a joke. So like, we have a branch, just like you guys have, like the Americans have a branch of our intelligence that specifically deals with overseas issues, and then we have one that deals with stuff at home, and it's basically like they're like saying that they'll get intercepts on like in other countries and shit like that. It's like, it's definitely not, like, that's extremely unlikely to happen. So in the case where you have, like, say, an Australian citizen who has the latest Cisco whatever with an IPsec tunnel to third world country, and nothing on the exposed on the boundary, there's no, like, the only traffic coming out is like correctly configured IPsec tunnel. It's basically like, oh yeah, we're going to ask the other country to help intercept. It's like the only thing they could possibly do is target the endpoint within Australia. There's like no, either that or go on some full espionage shit. So they better be doing some like real crimes to like warrant spending all our tax money on that, right? That's yeah, that's pretty much the end of the bill. It goes on. It's pretty it's pretty vague in a lot of places. It's pretty scary. I don't really like it, but I guess we're stuck with it now.
Yeah.
But it's to protect the children, right? So.
Yeah, think of the children.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty wild. I mean, I definitely want to keep looking at how these kind of things play out, because it's really important to see how it goes out around the world, because a lot of countries just set precedents, and when things start happening, it starts to tear down what available privacy there is left.
Right. Yeah. So with I guess the next thing would be, if with the international stuff, our agencies being part of Five Eyes, obviously, is UK, Canada, New Zealand. Probably New Zealand is our our closest sort of, we're the most like them, I guess, and then just spreads through like a disease through our private systems.
Yep. So yeah, speaking of more diseases spreading through the private systems, this one was really interesting. So it looks like the UK police have rolled their own mobile fingerprint scanners that they're going to be using for people to get pulled over or whatever, to just be able to scan, collect their biometric data, and be able to check if they have any warrants or any other offenses or whatever. But they've made their own tool and app for this, and they're deploying it.
Haven't we figured out that fingerprints suck? Like, biometric fingerprint scanners are terrible.
I mean, there's a lot of terrible aspects of this, but I mean, the thing that I'm always interested in is that they made this, like the UK Metropolitan Police Service made their own tool for this, and they're now just deploying it. So it's interesting to see that a larger police organization would make something like this and then have it be deployed with their own database and be able to build it further. Regardless of whether or not it's a good system, it's interesting to see that this was something that was just developed in-house and is now being deployed.
And it's going to be a bad system, because I feel like mobile fingerprint scanners do a much better job of proving that someone isn't somebody else than they do of proving who they are,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know what kind of rigorous testing they must put this thing through, but it seems that, I don't know, it sucks that this is a thing, and that there could be those errors that get you brought to jail or whatever, just because of your fingerprint rather than any other sort of identification you might have.
I mean, the problem, I think, like, so if a cop stops you right in the States and says, "Can I search your vehicle?" You can gladly say no, and he can decide to get the dogs down.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say no.
Right? Yeah, you can say no. Yeah, I get.
I
But
mean,
like,
you still got to do what you're told though, or you're like disrupting the peace and a whole bunch. You still have to do what you're told.
right?
But
So
you have the right to refuse. You're just probably going to get arrested.
yeah, but like, can you refuse to give over your fingerprints? Can you just like, cause I don't know. Like, I feel like with I was talking to someone else about this earlier as well. Like passcodes on your phone, right? Where you can unlock your phone with your face, with your fucking fingerprints, whatever. Like you can't refuse to look at the phone. They just hold your face in place and put the phone in front of it, right? Like that's seems what the deal with fingerprints is. Like they're just gonna force the fingerprint rather than you know.
Dude, I have never used a fingerprint scanner device on any of my devices ever. It just seems like a bad idea. I've never done it.
Yeah, I don't know. It just to me, it's just another one of those things that is somebody has made a tool. They want to roll it out. It seems like a good idea based on the context they're trying to deploy it for. But as we know, for all these different sorts of things, people do not store data properly, do not parse information properly on the fly, and rely too heavily on the results that are passed to them by whatever sort of application they're using. So, just another thing to keep in mind that I think is interesting that they developed their own thing, and they're now, who knows if they're going to make it commercially available, you know?
And like, is it going to stand up in court? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they like it could. For all we know, like this could have been developed by like some beat cops, like 13-year-old kid. Oh yeah, I got a fingerprint library. I was plugging in this Android phone, and then like oh roll this baby out. We got him now, son.
Yeah.
Yeah, they won the bid.
Yeah. It's I don't know. It's interesting to see, and I'm gonna keep looking out for more things like that. The last news story that we have on here.
My question about that fingerprint scanner though is, what happens when the inevitable dumbass cop loses his phone? Does that mean that whoever has that phone now has access to that whole database?
Hopefully.
Like that's like seriously a huge security flaw.
I mean, you could like just steal the APK. You could,
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like the cop loses his phone, you just rip the APK, and then you just, oh, well, I found this phone, and it said property of the police department. You bring it back, and nobody thinks anything of it.
No, it's probably locked with his fingerprint, so it's totally secure.
I mean, this is the point where there's that scene in Mr. Robot. Spoilers, plug your ears if you haven't watched it, and if you haven't, you suck. Where Tyrell just goes and fucks that guy to like get to his phone,
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so Matt Toper here in the YouTube chat says that police can force you to use your biometrics to open your device. But funny enough, Android 9 has a new feature called Lockdown Mode, which prevents accessing the phone using biometrics temporarily. And Crypt0s also shared a similar article.
Wait, he said that you can, because I thought that they can't force you to do that. I thought
They
there
can
was like
force you, but if you can lock your phone out from letting you do it, then you can too. Just another.
I want to see citing on that.
Dude, I mean, it's like, the cops just, it's like at any point you have a choice. You can either do what the cops tell you to or not. And if you don't do what the cops tell you to, you're going to get arrested. And if you can afford to fight it in court and stand up for if you have enough money to stand up for your rights, then fucking do it. And, if you don't have money, you're going to fucking sit in jail.
But I'm a sovereign citizen. I don't have to roll down my window.
You're a Canadian girl. This is America.
Oh, yeah,
I thought this is America. Randy Marsh.
Free man on the land, traveling. You haven't made joinder. You don't spell your name in all caps. What is this nonsense? Turns out they don't care about that stuff.
Crypt0s, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, again.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
So the last news story that I have on here, but I have a couple of good reads, is the so Microsoft apparently threatened to ban Gab.ai for some offensive posts, and it's interesting. Following up what we talked about and the news about Alex Jones being taken off of Facebook and all the other different sites for his just violence or calls to action and violence against people and just wild conspiracy theories. But it's interesting because we talked about this from the perspective of all of those different platforms are, private businesses, and they can do whatever they want with their business. I mean, they don't have to. They don't have to abide by the Constitution. But Microsoft threatened to kick them off of Azure Cloud's hosting for their content, and they're saying now that they are violating their free speech rights. I don't know if you guys saw this.
Yeah, it's kind of like feeling that Caesars is violating your free speech rights when you're in their casino and their premises. Start your own casino if you want to make your own rules. Same with hosting, same with everything.
Wait, but in large letters here, it's got like raising Jews as livestock. I mean, that's some pretty out there. That's a pretty fucking.
I think it's pretty interesting that
weed
over the
style
years,
shit.
out of all the horrible things Alex Jones has said in the 2 decades he's been doing this, finally he hitches his wagon to an actual sitting president. He isn't automatically against everything that the president's doing. And that's when he gets taken out, is when he actually agrees with somebody for a change.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me. I don't know. I don't understand what the motive is behind it, but I suspect it's bigger than just Alex running his mouth.
Well, I think it's really. Oh, sorry. What were you going to say, Jim?
I was gonna say, do you think this is like a new trend that we can expect from everybody? Is to if they don't like what you're saying, they can just boot you?
I mean, I honestly think so, mainly because of the concern for disinformation that is really running.
That's what they do in China. That's what they do in other controlled internet environments.
Yeah,
Russia,
but
China.
That's state controlled more so than private entity controlled. But with I
Yeah,
think
like, do you want to compare us to fucking China, really?
Well, I think
They blurred the lines a little bit because, you've got Zuckerberg testifying in front of Congress. If he was untouchable and could do anything he wants with his platform, that wouldn't be happening. So,
It's
there's some
state,
parallels.
state back doesn't mean
Intelligence asset, though. Really, honestly. I mean,
have any consequences to face for his actions at all. So, I mean, they're basically saying, hey, do you know what you're doing?
Whatever.
I mean, I think though the main thing that people a lot of this is a reaction to the really the escalating tensions regarding basically psyops that are being performed on people through propaganda and really divisive things, and it's it sucks. It sucks that there has to come down to people squabbling over stuff like this because people have been running their mouths online, saying really crazy stuff since the internet has founded. So
I think if Discord decided that they didn't like our content and shut us down, I don't think we'd be fighting for our free speech rights. We'd all understand.
Absolutely not. We would
Okay,
make our own
private environment.
This is convenience mainly. Same with Twitter and YouTube.
And I thought Gab would have had the same kind of mentality. That's just, Microsoft is letting us do this for now. If they change their mind, we go somewhere else. Take our business
you know
elsewhere.
what I think is weird? Doesn't Alex Jones have his own website?
Yeah, with a lot of traffic.
I suspect that that just like you was getting at, I suspect there's another motivation here. Just a lot of these operations happen when there's a groundswell to move and populate a new particular platform, just like what happened with Mastodon, Gab.
I think though as well,
there could be like infowartube.com could be launching 2 weeks from now, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think though, a huge thing, so we've always had the mentality of hey, you want to run your own IRC server where a bunch of hackers talk about fucking shit that someone doesn't, the network doesn't want you to talk about. You rack a box up, well, not anymore, but you used to rack a box up and you put it on that, and now you do whatever the fuck you want. That's your playground. And then now you've got a different scenario where everyone's using cloud-based stuff, and based on like, you know, if you're Mr. Alex Jones and you want to get fucking what are they called? Like you want SEO points or whatever, then you have an Azure IP or an AWS IP that's, you know, hosting your site. You get sort of treated a little bit differently in the internet that you do as if you just have like single hosted boxes are no longer really the norm, I guess. So when it comes to hosting a service, like if you're cloud, you get the quote benefits of the cloud, which can include like SEO and you know, CDNs and all that kind of shit.
Well, if you delegate authority in that way to the cloud, then you delegated authority, right? It's just like with SSL, or IP range allocations through MyCAN or whatever, or DNS itself. If you step on the wrong toes, you know, president of the internet makes a phone call, and so long IP space, so long DNS name, so long whatever.
Yeah, your site are blockers forever, never allowed to send email.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I mean, understanding the playground that you're in, like a lot of people get outraged to go, how dare they take away my website? Well, who do you think controls the delegation of websites? It's not the guy that you namecheap.com or wherever you bought the domain name from. No, there's a higher authority, and if they decide you get off the internet, then you get taken off the internet. And understanding that reality of whose internet you're playing on right now, I think is very important in developing as a hacker.
But can't he just host his own shit on Infowars?
He already, of course, he's done that for 20 years, and he's been shut down hundreds of times. He's been banned from YouTube and everything. So don't believe the hype. This time is a little bit more coordinated because he's been taken off Spotify and stuff. But years ago, he was banned multiple times, and he'd have to revert back to shortwave radio, the GCN network. It was its own infrastructure. And he used to use this as a tool to self-promote. He's saying, we've been banned again because we're telling the truth. Of course they're going to ban us.
No,
that's chemicals in the water turning the frogs gay.
Buy my supplements.
I have an honest question that's gonna kind of go a little bit off track, but was Alex Jones always this crazy?
Yes.
Okay. That's
probably worse, far worse. In fact, he got fit, he got healthy, probably because of his supplements. I don't know, but
probably because his wife left him.
Yeah, that too. Let's not too ad hominem, Mr. AJ, because he's got gangs. They'll come after us. But
squads.
Oh,
yeah. But I guess the whole proof of bringing this up was just to kind of mention the fact that there is another instance of a very large platform threatening hate speech, which is interesting. You got to take it either way if you want to, but it's definitely, as you said, Faith, you got to remember whose stuff you're playing on.
Exactly. I mean, look at what happened to the Daily Stormer. It was a kind of an absolutist kind of move. They were hidden behind Cloudflare for a long time.
Yeah.
And then eventually the king of the internet, whoever he happens to be, said, okay, no more Daily Stormer at all, anywhere. And there was a coordinated effort, and now they're, as far as I know, they're hiding. So
yeah,
I don't think that'll happen to Alex Jones, but he'll be back because he's allowed to be back. I'm not saying he's controlled opposition or anything. I just think he's considered relatively harmless in the whole scheme of things. He is selling supplements. That's what he does. He appeals to conspiracy folk, and he's very good at it. Maybe this is just a timeout. Maybe it's just a timeout, just a slap to remind him
just
where he's
slap.
playing it. The friendly little kick in the bum.
So speaking of friendly little kicks in the bum, I have a good read that I kind of wanted to share real quick, and I hope you guys may have seen this because I thought it was pretty cool. So this is an article about basically like Eternal Blue or facts. So somebody has done an exploit where they reverse engineered all this printer firmware, and they had figured out that there was bugs in the parser for images that were being sent, fax images. And by hiding a bunch of information in some of the tags in images, like the com marker, DHT, stuff like that, they were able to trigger a buffer overflow and then be able to spread their payload through the network that the printer was attached to. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, but I'm really surprised because I've always known printers to be ultra secure.
Oh, right.
I definitely don't use network printers as hops or 2 of 8, 8 of 2 on X, like nothing. Like, printers are very secure.
Yeah.
Was this in response to HP opening up a bug bounty program?
I'm not sure. What is this printer again? Hold on.
Because I know they just opened it up on I can't remember what platform, but they started a bug bounty program recently.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that'd be cool to play around with too.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked. There's like, so these printers they were looking at, were they just like your standard sort of desktop printer, or were they like multifunctions?
They're like all-in-ones, and they're trying it out with different types of
Yeah.
printer.
So like the all-in-ones that I've tested previously have been embedded Linux machines, and like embedded Linux machines with like regular hard disks in them, like 250 gig hard disks, 400 gig hard disks, just like sitting in a printer. You know, touchscreen. The touchscreen has a browser. The browser's user agent is like some, a variation of Firefox, or whatever Gecko rendering engine. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of attack vectors on those multifunctions. So opening up a bug bounty, I think, is going to be real interesting because there's a lot of low hanging fruit, and most people don't update or patch them as they are. So,
hey, public service announcement too. If you're upgrading your printer in your office and you got one of those big multifunction printers, and say you're like leasing it from a printing company, you've got the right to request the hard drive out of that printer just for security reasons, because that hard drive is full of information that you don't want it going to the dump or back to the depot or anywhere.
Yeah. No, I mean, definitely interesting attack vectors. I don't know. I feel like it was really just interesting to see the sort of approach that they took doing it. It's pretty cool. They have a detagulator in there.
hey, there was something else I wanted to mention real quick that came out at DEF CON. So just before we move on to our topic, did you guys see? So I noticed this a while ago in OSX, where when you load a kernel extension, it's blocked through the privacy settings or whatever. And there's a few things that are like this, and you don't have to enter your password, like your sudo password, to load it. You just need to click. And so there's all this, like there's the allow button. There's all these things coming out now where like simulated clicks are apparently back in fashion on the OSX desktop. I don't know like why this is like I thought it was a bit sketchy like when I noticed it, but I didn't ever think about exploring it. But yeah, I guess this simulated clicks is now being called a 0-day, and yeah. Have a look around. It's like if I saw one earlier where Pages was requesting access to contacts. Someone I think put that one in Discord. There's another one, like loading, any kind of driver. If you load, say, Divi or something, which is like a desktop, no, not Divi. Divi's a pretty bad example, but like something like Little Snitch, which is like a firewall or something like that. You need to enter a password. But if you load, other like system stuff, you just have to click allow. So you could go out there and start writing your payloads, guys, while simulated clicks still live. I mean, don't do crime.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a ton of really interesting things that I've been still meaning to check out. From DEF CON. I actually started reading that guide for the first time. All the different talks that I'd missed. That was definitely one of them. There's a couple different OSX things that I'd seen as well. Sweet. The last little good read you guys should check out too is the piping botnet. That's what it's called. Basically, people had found a bunch of hacks in irrigation and water systems, which would potentially like flood whole cities. So pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah, it's awesome when that kind of stuff is just somehow running on some old Windows XP machine or something.
I had some really interesting conversations many years ago. I was in a DC. I met the guy who worked in the basement, and in the basement, his job was to like environmental controls for the data center. And we were talking about some of the technologies used. And I guess to most electrical engineering people, this is like old news, and I'm an idiot. But the difference with the device being, if you're measuring water pressure or something by voltage, like 0 volts would not be like zero pressure. That would be disconnected. Like there has to be, yeah. So keep that in mind when you're like hacking on stuff. So if you're measuring between zero, like 0 and 5, 0 being disconnected and 1 being like the lowest pressure. So, yeah. So this irrigation stuff, I'm sure, is probably been in places for a long time. The IoT aspect is probably a nice add-on that they added at some point to get to that XP machine. But yeah, it might have been run on something a whole lot older beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's our new segment. I think that we should try to start a little bit early with you, Crypt0s, since you're already here. So we're going to talk to you about just radio hacking, some of your projects, and your approach to radio protocol hacking. And Not Pike, I definitely want you to talk to if you have anything or questions to ask specifically, because you have a lot more experience with radio. I was actually really excited to see you at the Wireless Village at DEF CON. You're ripping it up with your stuff, doing CTF and everything. Pretty cool.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get the opportunity to go to DEF CON this year because I managed to convince my company to send me to a different part of Nevada, in this case, Henderson, Nevada, for the GE Radio Convention.
Nevada, not Nevada. Nevada.
Nevada. You say patata.
Shots
Sorry, I
fired.
got all my best friends right now, and they're just yelling at you because we're all Nevada locals.
Yeah, no shit. We actually eat tomatoes.
So, Crypt0s, do you want to talk
California?
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Crypt0s, though? What you do and your background?
So, a while back, started getting involved in this hacker space called Unallocated Space in Maryland, Severn, Maryland, to be exact. And I met a couple of people, got into doing penetration testing, and landed my first job actually at Ponte Tech over there in financial sectors, Fortune 500, hospitality, that kind of stuff at consumer electronics. While I was there, I had a second job as I think often probably many of these people in the chat channel have. But while I was doing that, I was also working for this company called Department 13. Was a research company at the time, and we wanted to explore how to use the protocols of wireless devices against. And the reason for that was because that's a lot harder to patch. It's a lot harder to patch that MAC layer than anything else. And one of the things that we did was, the obvious like Wi-Fi DDoS attacks and stuff like that. But we also invested a little bit of money in doing stuff like Zigbee. Part of this, we actually ended up getting this grant from JPL, Johns Hopkins, to develop sort of like a white paper about, hey, how does that work? Like, how do these wireless protocols get attacked? And we ended up starting a company because we demonstrated drone hacking at this thing, and suddenly every three-letter agency in the around the area decided to show up to this, and we demonstrated hacking a Parrot drone. And from there, we actually built this company called Department 13, and we started offering this counter drone product. When I started getting really hot and heavy into doing radio hacking, became a Killer Bee contributor, contributed a couple of exploits there, but also started breaking down the protocols that these drones use, breaking down the protocols using software-defined radio, writing my own modems, and figuring out how to do stuff like quantize bits and actually make bit decisions, and doing filtering and coming up with the actual packet from the PHY layer, and then and doing all the other stuff that is at the upper layers.
Yeah.
And we found out that we could actually exploit drones and fly them around, so we made a product doing that, and that's kind of where I am now.
Is your product similar to the Drone Strike product, which is an Australian product?
I don't think it is, because not many products do what we do. There are some. White Fox is a counter drone product that utilizes what we call protocol manipulation in this case. And anybody who's listening, protocol manipulation would be a similar sort of path to doing like a deauthentication attack, where you forcefully
It sounds
disconnect.
exactly. I've heard the exact same story from the guys here. So it sounds like they've found the same path to a product that you guys have. Maybe not exactly the same, but in the same ballpark.
But we do own the
And I
patent on it. So, and it's actually funny you mentioned Australia. Our company is actually Australian via something called a backdoor merger, which I'd be happy to answer questions. It's not phallic in nature at all.
So surprise! I keep trying to tell you guys that Aussies are snipers, but you don't listen.
So, so tell us a bit more about how you got involved in some of these projects. So you mentioned Killer B. What is that?
So Killer B is a 802.15.4 a suite of tools for attacking, sniffing, and decrypting 802.15.4 traffic. And well, not quite. 802.15.4 is the MAC layer that Zigbee is built upon. So Zigbee operates almost as like, TLS is operating on top of, TCP, for example, or other protocols. But 6LoWPAN, which is actually a IPv6 protocol operating over top of that. So you can run a lot of different stuff across it, and you can exploit those things using Killer B. And there are a couple of different attacks that you can leverage, such as massive joins, massive disconnects, and there's even a couple of battery exhaustion attacks, because a lot of times these things are coin cells. But I kind of fell into it because one of the things I really enjoyed doing when I became a penetration tester was getting sat down in front of a product. As I really love hacking consumer electronics devices, mostly because they're like usually pretty vulnerable, but also because sometimes you get these like really long sort of chains to vulnerabilities, and Zigbee and IoT devices kind of represent that sort of transition area between the physical and the digital worlds. So if you're hacking a door and it's a fire door, it has a lot different sort of like permanence for the people who can't get beyond the fire door. So there's a sort of different urgency and permanency to the things that you do when you're attacking IoT devices. So that's kind of, I think, why I got into it. Plus, radios are cool as hell, and I didn't want to do Wi-Fi stuff.
Hey, so with the drone stuff, like making use of stuff like return to base when they lose signal, and is that kind of something that you try and control?
So anything that the operator can do, we try to implement that ability in the product, and we try to reverse engineer it. So if you can, through a disconnection event to occur, such as return to home, we might be able to leverage that or replay that message or make you think that it's disconnected and returning home.
Nice.
So, I guess, what is your sort of approach when you start developing exploits for things like Zigbee or for drones? I mean, what kind of tools do you use? What kind of approaches do you take that is, I guess, similar or different in a way to like more traditional like web application or network pen testing?
Sure. In the early stages, I would say that it's actually a lot like doing your OSINT research for a target when you're a penetration tester attacking a traditional target. You're going out, you're going to GitHub, and you're going to implemented this protocol perhaps, and you're looking for clues, and you're trying to say, okay, well, what C code can I kind of crib off of from the microcontroller to build what I need to build? But a lot of times you don't have that, especially if it's some proprietary link. Like I believe one of the challenges at the CTF 2 years ago was hacking the eTech City remote power switches, and there was some stuff out there, but I wanted to kind of go in a different direction and see how fast I could do it by trying not to look at some of that stuff. Basically, fire up two tools. and that is Osmocom FFT, because that is a great tool for recording spectrum from your software-defined radio, be it the Hack RF or the UHD devices, as such as ADIS products, and you can start recording that. Second tool called Baudline, and Baudline or in Spectrum, either one. Baudline allows you to kind of visualize that spectrum, allows you to see the waveform, get specific timing for baud, and you can start to break apart the protocol, and you can say stuff like, oh, okay, this is a frequency shifting protocol. This is OFDM. And once you start understanding what the modulation types are, you can start going out and looking for the parameters for the modem that you're about to build. In a lot of cases, you're going to see the cheaper stuff is going to use FSK. Why? FSK is a very noise resistant and cheap technology that you can put and get in mini chips. Infamously, the ChipCon chip series from TI implements a few different kinds of FSK protocols. This is you might actually be wanting to buy a ChipCon chip, such as the RFCAD, which is another absolutely invaluable tool. If you're trying to do any sub-gigahertz protocol in the 915 megahertz range, you need to buy an RFCAT, because you're probably going to be dealing with a narrow bandwidth FSK signal, and the RFCAT can not only demodulate that, but just give it to you plain over Python, and kind of makes that work go really fast. Once you get your modem parameters and you get a way to sort of modulate it, you start plugging that stuff into the mathematics of GNU radio. And it gets really complicated from there, because there's a lot of mathematics involved. But if you do have something like the RFCAT, then bing, bang, boom, suddenly you get packets out.
That rules. So that's how I feel like you really summed it up really well for something that's very complicated in a lot of ways, as far as just being able to identify signals and just sort of parsing this data. Because for the average person, I mean, even for me, and I've played around with radio a tiny bit, it sees lots of data, and it's just like overwhelming because there's so much noise in the air. So how do you, I guess, like hone in on different signals, especially in like some of the like ranges like 2.4 gigahertz where there's a lot of stuff around there? Like, what do you sort of use to be able to pick out signals you want and go from there?
So if you got a big boy budget, you get something which is basically your microwave. You get a Faraday cage, right? And you put your stuff in there, and they come with all sorts of toroidal chokes and magnetic chokes and stuff like that to limit inbound signals, so you get a nice quiet environment. This costs thousands of dollars. If you just have a Hack RF and your target, you might want to do something like get a attenuator from Amazon. Actually sells these, and you can get different kinds, but you need an attenuator, by the way, because you're going to directly attach the device you want to test on radio, and you do not want to blow up the preamp on your software-defined radio or your LNA rather. So you're going to attenuate the signal using a $50 so that you don't blow anything up on the other side, but you're going to directly connect your target to your software-defined radio using a nice shielded cable. And then you get a much better idea of, okay, all the noise is very much attenuated. It's a lot closer to the noise floor. And the only thing that should be popping up is your target signal, plus or minus some harmonics from that, plus or minus some leakage from stuff like the LO, plus or minus, some really strong background signals, like if you live right next to a FM broadcast station or something like that. That's how we do it at the office, is basically we just take that drone controller, pop the antenna off of it, plug in something that's got an SMA connector on the end of it, directly attach the radios, and then start hunting through the frequency spectrum. And you also do stuff like if it's got one FCC number on it, and it says in the FCC license, like, hey, this thing transmits at 2.4 gigahertz. And you can infer a lot of details about the device's operation utilizing that. But you got to be careful. You can't just rely on that, because there's like a $500 fee that these companies can pay, and they can keep their data confidential. So if you're Apple, you're not, giving out the details of how all of your RF stuff works to competitors and stuff.
So you mentioned buying like big boy budget Faraday cages. What about for small boy budget Faraday cages, like a bag of chips, or like I know, like I've made one out of like cardboard box and a glue stick and some foil. Like
I tried doing exactly what you did. We went out and we bought some chicken wire, and it wasn't chicken wire. It was much more fine than that, but you know what I'm talking about. Bought some wire mesh and wrapped up cardboard box, and it wasn't good enough. So we took some foil and we wrapped it. It wasn't good enough. We kept going. Didn't really work too great. They sell these almost that are that make RF shielding tents. Buy them, and they're only like $100 or $200, but they do a really, really good job of attenuating wideband like noise, and so you can just kind of drape this cloth over it.
I was looking into these shielding fabrics that you can buy, carbon shielding, all kinds of stuff, and I found some information that suggested that that seawater, that salt water, but particularly seawater, is really, really good at shielding, and wet clay is also quite really helps us in a high-tech environment. But if you want to make a cheap Faraday cage, I mean,
put it under your bathtub.
Submarines go under salt water, right?
They do, and they have to use very, very, very low, high energy signals to communicate with the outside world when they wouldn't be wireless.
Well then, now we know. We need to look for very, very low, high energy signals.
And
the wavelength of those signals is like measured in mountains.
All the best data centers in the world are clearly like in undersea locations, like Sea Lab at the bottom of the ocean somewhere.
So yeah, that's really interesting. There's so much like to it. I mean, I've seen like anechoic chambers and all the crazy other stuff that you have if you're really doing RF testing things. But I mean, it seems like if you're doing something, say like tactical, you're doing like sort of even like a combat mode of disabling drones or doing some other sort of radio warfare. There's a lot more to it, definitely. Yeah.
I think something. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned that one of the things I think is really a huge turnoff to more people getting involved in this is the budgets, because if you don't have $600 to buy the hack RF and the radio attachments and the cables and all that stuff, it's very like overwhelming to purchase all this stuff at once. But for those listening that really want to get involved in doing radio stuff, like go out, get the RF cat evaluation kit, get the yardstick one, and get these chip-on-chip radios, the Ubertooth.
Yeah,
cheap
if
ways.
it's a really good idea to start with like an all-in-one kit, like an Ubertooth, and spend the money until you learn how it works, and then you can put it together yourself for cheap, like with components from Alibaba. Once you understand it at a low level, but I mean, yeah, you're not going to get it much cheaper, but you can do it. Hopefully, as you learn, you start getting better at electrical engineering. You can knock something together out of stuff you have laying around.
I would even suggest actually just getting even cheaper than that. Just get yourself like an RTL SDR from Amazon, the one with actually the Tesco oscillators. They're a lot nicer, and just literally just buy our Arduino components and code it yourself. There's been some projects where it pretty much actually just figured out you can do like a $2 solution instead of actually buying a CC1111 capable USB device like the RF Cat.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to getting into it, as you guys are saying, like, the budgets and trying to get stuff. I mean, like I have an RTL SDR. That's what I've used for all of my radio stuff, but it's still good. It's got me interested in a lot of things. So it's cool to see that there are really cheap solutions to get you into stuff. But so I guess from your perspective, Crypt0s, what are some of the sort of biggest vulnerabilities that you see with wireless protocols, or what are I guess can you kind of walk us through the sort of like discovery process and like what those mean? I mean, if we can, I guess for computer things directly, we know what CVEs and phone classes, but what are some of the phone classes that are in radios?
I mean, take yourself back to the early 2000s and welcome to the state of most radio security. It really is quite poor because at least when we talk about stuff like IoT and consumer electronics devices, the idea is to get the margins thin. Or, I'm sorry, to make the margins fat by making the costs thin. So you are going to look at a radio chip and you're going to say, well, as an AES engine, but that's 5 cents more expensive, and over the course of the millions of devices I'm going to make, man, it's going to cost a lot of money, and I'm going to have to pay some programmers to figure out how to use the engine, and then we're going to have to make all this code to share the. Let's just roll our own crypto, and then you get into these situations where you're making these obvious mistakes of rolling your own crypto, or just saying, oh, we won't use crypto. Who's going to have another device that can speak this protocol?
Yeah.
We'll use a really weird modulation scheme. No one will be able to configure anything to talk to this, so it won't be a problem. And so lots of times people just say like, oh, well, the serial number is good enough. And when you talk about like really simple radio links like point to point, that's usually all it is. It's just some regular preamble, just 1010101010, followed by a header that just contains the serial address of the device that you want to talk to. And that's all it takes to communicate to it. One valid communication, you can kind of guess at what the rest looks like. And with stuff that gets more complicated, when we talk about stuff like mesh networking or repeat messages, it's overly complicated in a lot of cases. And that's why you see sometimes a lot of the Zigbee device vendors and the 802.15.4 vendors won't even implement the whole spec. A common problem, like people go and they start using Killer Bee, they're like, oh, this tool doesn't work, it's broken. No, the device just chose not to implement this message.
Yeah.
So I would say the most common vulnerabilities are, rolling your own crypto, not using crypto, having very simple access schemes with no message validation, and having just in general like no format validations. People think when they make it, oh, like no one will ever be able to use this but us because you don't have the hardware, not knowing like, oh, there's these software-defined radios available for anybody to buy for, a couple $100 to transmit and receive. They think they're fine, and they're not.
No, I mean, that makes sense, especially because when you think about it, I mean, it's the same reason that IoT devices themselves have big bones like these that are from the 90s, like where there are, it's mainly like cost and as well as just investing in R&D in general is the reason why a lot of their stuff just is like, oh, why is there no, why is it just if you connect to the JTAG and just drops you to root shell, or why is it that like why there's so many different random little things that you can see from a price perspective why it makes sense, but from a security perspective, or it does not make any sense at all. So,
and some of these vulnerabilities, I alluded to this earlier, can become very difficult to fix because if you find a vulnerability in something like Bluetooth 4.0 in the key exchange mechanism, that happens. We told you about this and you released the spec anyway. Now you got to release a whole new version of the spec. Yeah. And so you have to wait for device uptake. Normally, in these small devices, have a way to just reflash the firmware because that affects your bottom line when somebody bricks something and it's like, hey, that's your fault. A lot of cases, you find these vulnerabilities and that's there forever. And there's no way, and if you find it in a protocol like Zigbee, it could stick for a really long time. Like how long have we been dealing with 802.11 vulnerabilities like the deauthentication attack? They still have not had 802.11w deauth attacks, but people don't use it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely slow to roll out stuff. I mean, a lot of devices are going to be supported for many years, especially depending on the application. So that makes a lot of sense. So I guess, do you have any sort of advice, I guess, for people who are designing radio stuff that you would like to share, or any big things? Like, I guess, tips?
I would like to know what's your go-to book and where do you go online? What's a good online community to learn this?
For the Zigbee book, I'll have to consult my Amazon here, but there's this really good handbook about the 802.15.4 spec. Sat down and I read the book.
Is it written by Travis Goodspeed?
No, but he's all anything.
Yeah, but specifically Zigbee. I mean, he wrote like ZBD framework or whatever back in the day, right?
I have the book right here in front of me right now. Sorry to pop in, but it's actually Zigbee wireless networks and transceivers. Actually, Crypt0s, you recommended that book when I started actually learning about all this, and I have to say that was actually probably the most useful book I ever had in my life.
Which book is that?
It's created by Neutrons. It's Zigbee wireless networks and transceivers. It's like a red outline book.
And the author is?
1 second. Let me actually get the data. But it's like a $70 book, and honestly, it's worth it. It even has some pretty good information about just normal hardware implementation. So it kind of branches off into other aspects of wireless technologies. But highly recommend it. 1 second.
That's the pan side of things, I guess. What about just the drone side of things in general?
Notebooks.
Yeah, exactly.
But
if you write one, you're going to get a visit from somebody pretty quickly. So
you say that.
I know this. We have meetups in Australia. I know in the major cities we have like meetups of students at the major universities that hack on drones all the time. I don't know if other countries are like that or whether we're just particularly interested in that kind of stuff here. But
no, I mean DEF CON last year had a small little challenge some company put on to hack a drone, and it ended up being it was a Hubsan A107 chip, which is a clone. By the way, can't get this out enough. Like pretty much everything out there is a clone of the Nordic NRF 2401. So you want to learn how to hack some radio stuff, just get a couple of those Nordic NRF 2401 chips and start messing around with your Zigbee and your software defined radio. But Mike Osman, in addition to this Zigbee book, Mike Osman has great tutorials, and if you actually are sitting down and trying to do the math, Khan Academy.
I think it's pretty important to get across the pan stuff for the whole smart grid future that we're moving into slowly but surely. I mean, drones are just part of it, but smart meters in your house, smart fridges, etc. They're all using these low power, localized networking technologies. Especially the smaller, like you're saying before, the smaller devices that are battery powered. It's all low power stuff. They're not going to be using 802.11 Wi-Fi. So I think it's important in general drones are a cool way to play with this stuff, but there's a lot of other little gizmos and gadgets that are going to be using this in the future.
Absolutely, and actually Zigbee is not too common for drones. It does exist, but it's not the protocol of choice. I mean, if you want to talk more about Zigbee, I mean, what a complicated terms of PHYs. There's only a few devices that you can easily buy which perform the sub-gigahertz versions of Zigbee, and
I've only ever encountered roll your own versions of Zigbee. I've never actually seen official Zigbee. I've seen proprietary, sort of like Zigbee 802.14.15, whatever, but it's proprietary and we're not going to tell you anything about it. You've got to black box test it. That's a bit of a problem coming from the security pen testing point of view, is that a lot of times the vendors that engineer these things aren't really willing to give me source code or anything like that.
Where I mean, it's so difficult to get promiscuous mode hardware working for sub-gigahertz Zigbee devices, and it's been a big challenge. And I've been talking to Mike Kershaw or Dragorn. Kismet, how about that? I've been talking to him about finding some good devices for doing sub-gigahertz Zigbee, and I think one of the reasons why is because most of the vendors just want to do the worldwide ISM band 2.4 gigahertz. But there's this device, if you guys want to get more into doing this, it's called the Seiwo Open Sniffer. It's a little expensive, as most good tools are, but it does everything. Does the Chinese version, it does the sub-gigahertz version, it does multiple different PHY standards of Zigbee. and it can do stuff like continuous wave transmit. It can do promiscuous mode. It dumps it right into Wireshark for you. Everything is taken care of for you, and the chipset that it uses is very adaptable and flexible. And we were actually looking at that as being the basis for a sub-gigahertz version of Killer Bee. And I believe actually I saw a patch not too long ago that improved some support in sub-gigahertz Killer Bee as well.
Can you link that the tool just so we can actually put it on our show notes later? Because I'm actually kind of really interested in that.
Getting that now.
Oh, of course, later. But thank you.
Oh hell yeah! I feel like we post this in the chat as well. Check it out. So, do you have any other projects or anything that you want to discuss that you've been working on?
My most recent one about ZMap, and promptly started scanning the internet for stuff, and there is a lot of interesting message protocol passing algorithms out there that don't require authentication.
Yes.
You can immediately just see where that goes, and you can get lots of cool data that way. A lot of people are phones to this specific one, and constantly dumping out their GPS positioning information on their phones.
Really?
Yeah, and this is like completely voluntary for some reason.
How is that?
You can also,
how's that actually being passed out? Like, what sort of protocols are they using to send out GPS data from the phone?
figure out how to navigate this effectively. There's a protocol which is used for the message passing, and it's a version of AMQP. It's like an implementation of that, and so it periodically will report its position. So if you come along and you scrape it and subscribe to all the channels, you can just sort of start picking up on. And there was actually a DEF CON talk about this 2 years ago, specifically about one of them called MQTT.
Oh, yep.
Statistics about this. And I was actually I contacted the guy behind Gray Noise for some statistics about who else is looking at this kind of stuff, and it's kind of eye opening. Well, there's a fair number of development, we'll say, implementations of this out and open that you can subscribe to, and you can get some interesting data, like the position of like a couple thousand fake taxi cabs in China.
Whoa.
And there's a look, if this can find a ton of potato farms using nothing but RDP, you can find some pretty interesting stuff using MQTT.
Yeah, definitely. That's used in a lot of different applications. Like, I even see that on like Instructables or like Hackaday or different little projects you can use that.
And a lot of those instructions don't tell them the people how to actually put authentication in it.
Yeah.
And so when they don't have a NAT, that becomes a big problem. So I've actually been looking at that and also looking at adding support to Kismet for Killer Bee, and as well as some other wireless that can be controlled, such as the RFCat and stuff like that. Besides that, bugs.
What kind of bugs?
Stuff. So.
Oh, okay.
There was a cool bug in about it, so I'm going to just stop right there.
That's really awesome. So yeah, I don't know, Pike, do you have any specific radio questions? I know that you have a lot more technical knowledge about radio stuff that I wasn't sure if you wanted to bring up.
Just trying to keep this at a level where I'm not sitting here actually geeking out and just doing live math on the air. But just kind of just starting out, I have an idea of already the answers, but I want to hear it from you too. But when you were talking about doing closed link setups, like literally connecting a Tanajack to a Tanajack, What are some recommendations? Like, what numbers would you look for, and like what attenuations for those old devices? Like, what do the dBs mean so people don't actually blow up their radio? I mean, those hacker Fs cost about $300, and we don't sit there and fry it by accident. You got any more detail about that?
Yeah. First, let me say that more is better. Always, always more is better because you can't break your shit if you've got too much attenuation. You generally want to start out with an understanding of how your hooking up is. But if you start with something like 60 dB of attenuation, that's a lot of attenuation. And correct me if I'm wrong, I am not an electrical engineer, but it's something like every 3 dB that you attenuate is half the the electrical power received.
Yes. Either half or doubling, depending if you're going up or down dB. But yes, you're
right. So if you're attenuating, you're taking out half the power every time you add 3 dB. So you have something like a 30 dB of attenuation. You're really knocking that down a lot. So you want to generally have like a 3 dB, a 6 dB, a 10 dB, and maybe even a 20 dB attenuator. And if you're on a tight budget, I would just grab a 6 and a 3 because that's 9 dB. That's knocking it down by a fair bit.
Yeah,
you need some. Go ahead.
No, personally, when I'm actually doing ISM band, usually they're kind of maxed out at 1 watt each by the regulation. That doesn't mean they're all kind of transmitting at that, but just as a safety factor, usually I get like a 30 and a 10, and then I put like 40 dB, which is equivalent to do some math here. It's 10 times 1,000, 10,000 times less than what the output power is, so it doesn't fry the radio on the other end.
Yeah, and I know that I get a little lazier because the Edis products, which I use at work, are pretty resilient to that stuff. They generally don't blow up, and trust me, like we've tried. So you can get away with a little bit more if your radio equipment is a little high quality. But in addition to getting those attenuators, you also want stuff like SMA polarity adapters. So you're going to be dealing with products that don't have the right polarity, so you need to get yourself a nice set of double-ended female, double-ended male, and reverse polarity adapters for SMA, and maybe even go so far as get yourself some like N-type adapters. N-type, everybody's seen the SMA adapters, the stuff on the back of your Wi-Fi router that connect your antennas there. They're small. N-type is like real big, beefy connectors that you use for like ham radio equipment.
It sounds like an expensive thing to get into.
It is. That's like the most hugest drawback is that, and that's why I get really upset. Kind of like people can't get into this because they don't have the budget to. Because I mean, most people aren't willing to drop like $1,000 on radio equipment, and you don't have to. Like, you can get the RTL SDR, then you can't transmit.
Yeah, but you have a big boy budget. Do you have one of those Faraday cages?
Just connect stuff directly.
He's just modifying like VGA adapters and using microwaves as Faraday cages like a homeless hacker. I'm sure he has no budget whatsoever for any of this stuff.
Productivity in my office stopped for like an hour when that news article about the VGA adapter being able to be turned into a radio came out, because we were like, oh my God, we have to buy one right now.
Yeah. Personally, I've done it myself, but dude, I'm so happy to see that happen. Anytime, it actually just kind of ties into keeping cheap hardware, but I just forgot his name. 1 second. I mean, dyslexic as hell right now.
Did you actually get that to work?
Tested it, unfortunately. The one I'm closest to testing right now is the claim that you can turn the 802.11 AC chip on the Raspberry Pi 3 Plus into a TX SDR, but you can't receive with it. For 99% of the people listening, though, it's like, if you want to transmit, go out, get the Hack RF. It's the best supported, best used, most popular radio peripheral item that you can get and get into SDR. Like, you can get stuff like the Ham It Up if you want to play in ham. Yeah, you should get the Ham It Up.
I do have the Ham It Up, the blue thing. Right, it's a piece of metal.
Talking about the SGR Ham It Up. Sorry, I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, it's a down converter, which means essentially it takes a chunk of spectrum from one place and slides it around to another place where your radio can actually listen to it. So it puts basically these ham radio frequencies in a band that the hack RF can listen to with supposedly like minimal, you know, leakage and interference entering the signal as a result of the up conversion.
So I remember the guy's name. I actually just met him at DEF CON. Troy, also known as Hard or Wave Guy on Twitter. He also is actually one of the hosts on the Hacker Warehouse. He actually gifted me this $2 Zigbee device that was normally used with Iris home automation that Lowe's has to offer. Come to find out, that thing's actually that's actually a Zigbee dev kit in USB form.
Yeah, and Dot Slash, who we hooked you up with, who's actually one of my coworkers at Department 13. He can hook you up real hard with that stuff too.
Oh no,
He used that
he
kit.
just sent it off today. I gotta owe him a big favor. I'm already building some antennas for him, so you can pretty much like share the wealth and pass it forward. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to actually see if I actually getting it set up, and definitely gonna talk more about like how we can actually implement this with the Killer Bee project. So we just have another cheap device for poor kids like myself can figure this out.
And thankfully, Killer Bee has this really kind of elegant driver subsystem. So we should just need to figure out how to implement the interface, and should just fall into place.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like I'm running out of radio questions to ask. Specifically, I guess besides like, what are some of the weirdest things that you have just seen? I guess with commercial products.
Commercial products, a lot of times because they're cutting those corners for cost, you are going to spend a lot of time writing a really good modem, and you're like, cool, this is good enough. I can demodulate packets and I can talk. Like move further away or closer to the device, and everything starts falling apart, and like your timing is off and your symbols are garbage, and like all of a sudden you're looking at the spectrum and everything's different, and you're like, well, what changed? And a lot of these cheaper devices just leakage all over the place. So as you get like closer to it, for example, you have to deal with the fact that you can actually watch the LO and actually see the chip like power up and charge the amplifier. Figure out how that, oh, there's some like weirdness going on, and you can actually watch like the silicon of the chip ramp. And that's actually something that I've heard some people tell me that the spooky guys do. They actually look at this chip act when it's like turning on. How does this chip act when it first jumps to a frequency? And like all these things are leaking out into the spectrum from the local oscillator and from the mixer and stuff like that. And it can, if you look at stuff like algorithms that are implemented in FPGA, you can actually look at how the mathematics signal being built are working, and you can fingerprint developers about how they implement the modulation, and you can figure stuff out like that. So there's a lot of these sort of like design decisions that can leak into the commercial hardware that you can use to fingerprint, like, oh, this device must be this manufacturer because only this manufacturer like pre-arms the local oscillator such and such before the actual preamble of the chip fires.
Yeah.
So that is actually some of the cooler things that you can do once you can start messing around with looking at the spectrum.
That's really cool. That's like what people do with fingerprinting developers for commercial software in general. So it's cool to see that from that perspective, because I feel like the sort of fingerprinting that you have to do, especially if you're like somebody who like tracks like shortwave stations or tracks like whatever, like the fingerprints of data that would normally be similar to other data sources, you'd be able to track like, I guess, what types of devices are sending out that data based on those kind of fingerprints.
Yeah, and I've been invited into rooms with these, multi-billion-dollar defense companies, and they make products that do nothing but use AI to do what's called feature extraction and extract these features, these unique fingerprints of the operation of these devices out and catalog them and alarm on them and use them to identify things.
That's really cool. That's similar to like, any sort of other network intrusion or packet sniffing, whatever kind of things you want to do. Because yeah, I mean that's really cool. So yeah, I guess what do you see, or what sort of future things are you interested in working on?
Interested in learning more about OFDM, which is a much more complicated modulation scheme that Wi-Fi uses, which is capable of transmitting a lot more data because it has many, many more carriers. And it has a very complex, or can have a complex forward error correction scheme. Satellites, but one thing that's especially intriguing to me, because I kind of have the hardware laying around, is doing radio telescope stuff and actually building images out of the once I get off the SDR. And there was a post on Hackaday where somebody actually like used a HackRF or something to the SI of received Wi-Fi packets and then like overlaid them on an image. Like I was like, man, that is so cool. That's just how like radio telescopes work. I want to do that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I really dig all the really crazy stuff for radio. It's definitely been way over my head for a while, but luckily we have people like Pike who hang out with us and tell us all the
weird antennas.
Yeah, and the awesome antennas.
And keep in mind, there is a lot of math. I'm a dummy. I usually just kind of use a lot of calculators and use everyone else's notes, so don't get discouraged by it. There's plenty of stuff even the physicists who actually invent the stuff don't know about.
Yeah. So cool. I mean, Crypt0s, do you have anything else, I guess, that you want to share before we end this real quick?
If you're really looking to get into this, start with Mike Ostman's videos and just ask a ton of questions about on any of the SDR related chat channels wherever you are.
Do you guys have a Stack Exchange?
Do you guys have a Slack?
Stack Exchange.
Both.
Specifically in relation to what?
SDR Stack Exchange. Is there like a?
Okay, I get you. But I have never checked.
Are there any other SDR groups like meetups or online groups or Discords or anything that you'd like to get out there?
Just with the good communities.
Highly recommend Cyber Spectrum. There's actually a really popular one over in Australia, believe it or not, that's actually still active. But before Brent, that other Aussie, I just probably just said his name wrong, but he actually did the Siren hack. He's actually another Aussie. He used to work for Edis Research for a little bit, but he used to actually host Cyber Spectrum, but they still have all their videos on YouTube, and there's actually a lot of good people talking about their projects.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, definitely. So how can people hit you up if they have any, or get in contact with you if they have any additional questions about this kind of stuff, Crypt0s?
Available to answer questions over email. My email account address is bryanhalf@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on Twitter. I'm at CRYPT0S Crypt0s. And I mean, I'm pretty available. As long as you're not a dick, I'll answer your question if I can, or direct you to others much smarter than I. As I still say, I'm radio stupid.
Oh yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us and sharing all of your knowledge. This is really cool stuff, and can't wait to look more at some of the projects you've been working on. But everybody, thanks for joining us too. We will be back on next Tuesday with Zuff's Defensive Automation Jamboree, where Zuff, here earlier, is going to be talking a bunch about his blue team automation and general blue team tactics. So, awesome. Yeah, Sweet. So yeah, check us out. All our videos are on YouTube, or if you're watching on YouTube, we're on Twitch, and we are also on Patreon. And we got some cool supporters and some cool things. Thanks to Harmony and No Cookies for supporting us. We're going to be putting that stuff straight into some cool projects and also into our very soon upcoming 24-hour CTF marathon that we're going to be doing in November. So we're planning that out, and we will see you guys soon. Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, Crypt0s.
Thanks, Crypt0s.